Hmm? A, because it has higher NPV. According to IRR rule, which one of these projects I would pick? B, both of them have a cost of capital greater than 9.688. And, this gives different results. The primary reason they give different results is scales are very different. Project A is a much bigger project, 10 times as big in terms of cost. On a per dollar basis, I make more money on project B, but I make less money on project A on a per dollar basis, but I make it on a lot more dollars. So when scales are very different, go with NPV. Anytime, this is true for any other criteria for mutually exclusive stuff. If there are conflicting decisions, go with the one, go with NPV. There are two other criteria we're going to use. Just like IRR, they do not know anything about the scale of the problem. It just calculates some sort of number per dollar. There's another measure like that. Uh, it's called profitability index. This has the notion of a little bit of rate of return, and we're going to call that PI. That's basically present value of future cash flows divided by cost of the project. And you can show that that's equal to 1 plus NPV over cost. So if you already have calculated NPV, calculating PI is not a problem. One plus NPV over cost. You probably are guessing the decision rule. For standalone projects, you're going to accept if PI is greater than 1. For mutually exclusive, you're going to pick the project that has the highest PI, provided that highest number is also greater than 1. Again, this knows nothing about the scale. For example, let me kind of squeeze in PI in here. And let's do it for project A now. PI is 1.17. Of course, I would pick second project again. Why? Because it has higher profitability index. Well, if that's the case, I'm going to pick that one. But again, even though you make a lot more money per dollar, you're making that money for a small amount of investment. This would actually be kind of useful if you're capital constrained, ranking different ones. Because right now we're acting as if all the projects are standalone, you accept all the projects with positive NPV. But if you have capital constraints, you're going to have to make some sort of choices. Then PI kind of becomes important. You start with the project that gives you the highest return per dollar, and you go from there. And I'm going to put a little formatting here to immediately tell you whether you should accept this project or not. In fact, I'm going to do kind of three choices. If there's a check mark, you should accept. If there's a red cross, you should not accept. But there's going to be some sort of narrow area where I'm going to say, be careful. Because these numbers are, after all, estimates. So don't necessarily accept a project if PI is 1.001, or don't necessarily reject it if PI is 0.998. I can pick those when I'm formatting. Home, conditional formatting, new rule. I'm going to pick icon sets, and I'm going to pick these icons. Number. If it's greater than or equal to 1.05, I'm going to give it a check mark. Otherwise, if it's greater than or equal to 0.95, I'm going to give it a yellow caution sign. Otherwise, it's red. I'm basically saying if it's within plus or minus of 5% of the cost, think about it before you make a decision. Otherwise, I'm telling you what to do. When you make presentations to people who may not necessarily have the same type of understanding that you do, it's always a good idea to lead them to lead them into how they should think about it. If you don't, they're going to ask you stupid questions, and you'll be bogged down unnecessarily. I've done that in my PhD dissertation, no problems. And those people are even supposed to know exactly what you're doing. Of course, they didn't. So let's make this. See, that's yellow now. Red. You could have done similar stuff on those, but I chose to do it only on PI. Let's see. We got about 15 minutes. Let's introduce one more topic. We're going to actually do something about IRR when the cash flows are not conventional. We'll cover that on Thursday. By the way, Jeopardy is next Thursday, not Wednesday. When you teach same class on different schedules, you keep forgetting about the times. Instead of calculating IRR in those cases, we're going to modify the cash flows so that they become conventional. Then we calculate an IRR for those modified cash flows. And that measure has a rather obvious name. It's called modified IRR. There's an Excel function that calculates it. Don't use it because it's not modifying the cash flows the way I'm doing it. Your book talks about 3 different ways of doing it. I'm using only one of them. The way I do it, I take the future negative cash flows, calculate their present values, and add that to the cost of the project and make that future cash flow 0. That's the modification. But today we're going to talk about a relatively simple one. You know, on this project, I put in $50,000. How long is it going to take me to get that money? We're going to make a simplifying assumption. And we're going to assume that cash flows for a given period come in at a uniform rate. So if I'm getting $50,000 a year, in 3 months, I'm going to get 12.5, right? In 6 months, 25, and so on. Let me first illustrate it with an example. I'm going to first calculate a column called running cash flow. And I'm going to make format exactly the same.